Hello and welcome to another big UC news show with me, David Dungay. Today we have our experts back to discuss the latest news trends of the last few weeks. What have we got on the agenda today? Well, we're going to be talking about IDC's latest report on Microsoft. We're also going to be talking about the Microsoft Work Trends Index. And then finally, we're going to talk about Avaya and their new Infinity platform. But before we do that, shall I introduce a few of our amazing guests? We have Mel Brue, Don Black, Blair Pleasant, and Zeus Kerravala. Welcome to the show. And of course, how could I forget my wonderful co-host, Mr. Kieran Devlin. Thank you for joining me. So, Kieran, where should we start? Should we start with the Work Trends Index from Microsoft? This came out just in the last week or so. Some really fantastic trends kind of emerging from that. I'm a lot of A and a lot of I going on in that report. Give us the latest. What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. As you say, Microsoft released its fifth annual Work Trend Index, outlining a vision for a future of work typified by a new form of organisation, what it calls frontier firms, built around complementary human agent units, intelligence on tap, and every worker adopting a new role as an agent boss. I think there's some understandable skepticism that a company that has gone all in on AI might be pushing AI as the future, but there's also a lot of rationale to it as well, of course. Mel, what did you make of Microsoft's AI dominant future work as outlined by this new Work Trend Index?
So I think you're right that this, might be a little overwhelming for some firms, and maybe there are some who are thinking like, no, that's never going to be us. But the reality is, as people start to introduce agentic AI, the workforce is really going to change how it looks organizationally. If you're using a bunch of agents, and that's a word I feel like we always have to clarify when we're talking about agentic AI, but using these kind of digital workforce, there has to be a change in the way that's managed. So I think what the Microsoft Work Trend Index really pointed out is, one, just the capacity challenge and digital debt that we're dealing with just globally, and I think this is just an accumulation of this constant communication and context switching, and hoping that agentic AI can kind of fix some of that. I mean, I hear a lot of things like, Bill McDermott calls it the soul crushing work. There's all kinds of things people say like, well, we're not going to get rid of people. We're going to get rid of the work that is just repetitive and that people don't actually want to do. And the things that can be automated. So I don't think that this trend index is actually saying everything's going to be automated, everything will change. It's more of like, if companies are leading, these frontier firms are leading with kind of AI first, they are seeing some benefits. So, leaders see it as a career accelerator. They trust AI for high stakes work. They're using AI regularly and getting the benefits of it. So in terms of time savings, thought partnership, things like that. But AI power users, according to the Work Trend Index, say that 90% of them say it makes their workload more manageable. And 85% of them say they start their workday with AI to use it to prepare for the day. So the users that are more connected to the organization's visions are more likely to kind of like internalize that the importance of AI from their leaders. And I think we're still like, there's still some tension that exists there. So 53% of leaders say that productivity must increase, and 80% of the global workforce report that they're lacking the time of energy for doing effective work. So I think in general, there's just this kind of AI skills gap and this kind of transformation and emerging job roles. So they talked about these agent bosses in these frontier firms. So there were some statistics on that. In the next 12 to 18 months, 28% of managers are considering hiring AI workforce managers. So effectively those agent bosses. 32% plan to hire AI agent specialists, and within 5 years, leaders expect their roles to include managing agents, redesigning process with AI, training agents, and building multi-agent systems. So I think that you have to look at this in a couple of ways. One, just this new organizational structure that companies are going to have to adjust to. If you look at an agent as a digital, coworker, who does the hiring, who does the managing? You have to kind of treat them like, is that an HR function? Is that an IT function? Or is it a combination of the two? So I think there's the tricky question here is measuring the ROI. So we're still early on that, I think, but getting to this kind of pivotal workplace transition, there's got to be some change in this like kind of organizational structure to take advantage of what they're considering like an essential durable good, which is basically intelligence on tap, as they call it. So I think we're still going to see this capacity challenge for quite some time. I think we've all used various tools that are not there yet. There's a whole lot of flashy demos and things that is promised with agentic AI and automation, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
So I'll add on to that because I listened to their talk about this the other day, and what really impressed me was the way they talked about. They recognize that there's a lot of fear about AI taking jobs, and they said over and over, think of digital labor as an additive force and adding to the existing labor. And they don't see digital labor as a replacement, but as additive. And they said that several times throughout, which I don't know if it's to make people feel good or if they really believe that. They did show one stat that showed that 33% of the respondents said that they will use AI to reduce headcount. So I think the number is actually going to be higher, but that's where they're seeing it now. And 47% said that they're prioritizing AI-specific skilling of their existing workforce. So obviously recognizing that they don't have the skills. But they did an interesting analogy. So they said, right now, the way things are going to change organizationally. And they said, right now humans specialize in certain things. Companies are structured in a way to, easily access that human expertise. But with this new AI and intelligence, it's going to be easier to access expertise. So the org chart is going to change from being based on expertise to being based on jobs that need to be done. So they gave an analogy like a movie set or making a movie. You bring in the cast, you bring in the crew and all the things that you need to make a movie. And then when it's over, you disband. So they're saying, can we use that same type of model in the enterprise? So then you have to think about, what kind of work can be done by humans and which by agents. And then are people just going to come together for a project and then disband? So I thought that one was kind of interesting. And then they also talked about a new metric, the human to agent ratio. So that might be something like, do you need 300 agents to one human? So it's going to depend on, the work that's being done and the role. So they said, like for HR, it might be a 1-to-1 ratio where there's just, one agent to one human. But in other roles, it could be, 300 agents to one human. So that's something that, people need to be thinking about, how many agents is the right number. And as Mel said, they talked about managing the AI labor. Is it going to be IT? So they said we should think about the having an intelligence resource department for digital labor. So, fighting, as Mel said, fighting it out between IT and HR, what's going to happen there. And one thing they talked about that I liked was, because I'm always talking about adoption and training. So they did acknowledge, people need training for AI. And they said that 46% think of AI as a thought partner, like a collaborator, and the rest think of it as a tool, like an AI search engine or something, and recognizing that, training and upskilling is essential. So I was glad to hear that because I think that's just so important. And, also emphasizing that AI literacy is going to be fundamental to any job. So, everyone in the organization is going to need to understand how to use AI, and that's where that training is going to come in. So Zeus, I think you're chomping at the bit to add something.
Yeah, I think this is setting up to be a classic Gartner hype cycle. Hype of, what do they call it? The slope of
trough of disillusionment. Yeah.
Yeah, well, right, and the peak of expected inflated expectations. I think the problem here is, first of all, a lot of what you see out there positioned to be an agentic agent is process automation, and we've had process automation for a long time. When you actually get to and this was a big topic of conversation at RSA, right? The whole concept of these agentic agents, you got to give them decision making authority. You got to give them access credentials to your systems. And so, take a simple use case, consumer use case. Dave Dungay says to his agentic agent, "I'm changing my flight to New York to go have lunch with Blair. Rebook my flight, rebook my car, rebook my hotel, and change the restaurant reservations." Well, now you got to give OpenTable, you got to give United, you got to give Hertz, Marriott, all these passwords, right? Who's going to manage that? How do you get the agents to talk to one another? And I think there's some basic use cases like I think contact center is probably one of the big low-hanging fruit use cases where it can issue a refund or something like that. But once you get to more complex use cases, I don't even think we've even thought about the complications behind having all these systems work together to actually make a decision for you. Like, think of a mortgage approval process, all that has to come through there, and that's probably one of the simpler ones. I also think I'm tired of the industry chickening out on the question of job replacement. It's going to replace jobs, right? I think the best quote I saw was David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, when he said, "Through every technology transition, we've destroyed jobs, grown productivity, and then created more jobs in the back end of the transition." So instead of Microsoft and its peers saying it doesn't really affect jobs, how about telling us, working on what those new jobs are? And I do think, Blair, your point on expertise is a good one. I've always said the internet democratizes access to information. AI democratizes access to expertise, right? And so you got to rethink how jobs are structured around expertise, not information, which they are a lot today. And so, but I think we're doing the industry a great disservice by making people feel comfortable, right? Because we've seen this movie play out before where telecom managers lost their jobs, mainframe managers lost their jobs, server administrators lost their jobs when virtualization came in. Help them figure out what the next job is and develop those skills versus making people feel comfortable with AI, because it's here to stay. And I do think we have a long way to go before the agents come in and start making decisions for us. There's just a lot of unknowns that we have to get through before we can actually have it do that. So
and Zeus, to your point, and do it before they lose their jobs, because once they lose their jobs, how are they going to get the upskilling and the training? So I see that as a big problem already.
And I've thought about this from the perspective of what happened with automotive, right? So back, I was at CES this year, and somebody I was talking to said we've made no progress in self-driving cars in the last 10 years. And the perspective was that 10 years ago, we were saying we'd have self-driving cars in 3 years. Well, we don't, right? But along the way, we've done a lot of things in cars to make us better drivers, safer drivers, smarter drivers. And so we've made tremendous progress with AI in car, right, to help us know where other cars are, lane change alerts, stuff like that. But I think we set the bar so aggressively that it does seem like we haven't made any progress. And I would say in this space, let's not get out over our skis and say that we're going to have all these agents working with each other. I think there's a gradual progression where it'll act as our coworker for a long time, and then eventually we'll let it make some simple decisions for us. But anything complex, there's just a lot of moving parts in there that just seems like it's further out than closer. So
There was something that Jensen Wan made a comment about losing jobs, and he said if people are losing their jobs, it means the company has run out of ideas. So I think we have to look at sort of the productivity gains and AI actually being able to help people do the things they weren't able to do before, not just productivity, but actually open up new lines of business, go after new accounts, do all, there's all this additive. But I do think the Work Trend Index addressed these roles that will include like managing agents, like I talked about before, redesigning processes and things like that. We talked about this over the last couple of days at Oracle as well. It's like the organizational structure is going to change. There's going to be, kind of some pain along the way of like how do we kind of stitch all of this together, because there's also like the sort of agency of the agent. So like, does my agent belong to me? If it's learning from me and I'm training it and I'm working with it, but I go to a different company, does that agent come with me, or is that the company's IP? There's a lot of things that we haven't even like touched the surface on.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on the job thing, but so Microsoft talked about, there are going to be new jobs emerging, AI trainers, agent and data specialists, ROI analysts, AI strategists. Those are all tech jobs. What about, the graphic artist, the journalist, the call center agent? How are they, those jobs, they're not going to be able to become an, ROI analyst or an AI trainer. So I think we do have to account for all the jobs that are going to be lost, because yes, you need to be more creative, but let's say you have five people doing a job. Let's say, web design. You're only going to need one person doing it, going forward. So what are those four other people going to do? They're not going to become ROI analysts. So I do really worry about the workforce and what's going to happen to people who, I don't know how they're going to be reskilled and upskilled in certain jobs.
I agree with that completely. I think there's two elements of that as well, which I see quite a few elements now where people are looking to hire headcount, and it's, well, can this job be solved with AI? If you can prove that it can't be solved with AI, then you can have the headcount to go ahead on that. And I think we'll start seeing more and more of that coming through as a policy. I think I agree on there are certain industries and certain verticals which are going to get decimated by this. You look at any translators, I just do not see a role for that going forward in the future. It's disappeared. But I think that the biggest challenge, I think, for the global economy maybe of this is how many new roles are going to be created which graduates and young people can come into, which are not trained, do not have background into this. And are they going to be the roles that, if we're talking about these new roles, as you talked about, they're going to be upskilling, reskilling existing people. But there's a huge number of the workforce who are going to be coming in every single year, where if those lower skilled, low impact jobs, which you're training people up on the job to do, are going to now be done with AI. You think around let's take a consultancy, for example, all those people taking notes, building slide decks, building that information, building up that knowledge base. That's going to be very hard to go, well, actually, AI can replace that. Well, sorry, it's very easy to say AI can replace that, but where's this new workforce going to come from? I think that's a challenge that I think we haven't faced yet, is how are we going to enable the new workforce coming in to have jobs, or is that going to completely disillusion them?
Yeah, it's just different jobs, though. I remember early in the internet cycle, people talked about the airline industry being decimated because, remember, if you wanted to buy a ticket, you actually had to go to that kiosk downtown or in a mall or something to pick up a paper ticket. And all those jobs have gone away, but because airline travel became so much easier to book, the airline industry has never employed more people than they do today, right? So, but they're just different jobs, right? There was very few contact center agents, that worked at an airline pre-internet because you went to the kiosk, and now there's like 10 times as many, I read, or something like that. But they are different jobs. It's just the people that take the brunt of the pain are the ones that are in the jobs that disappear, that didn't get reskilled, right?
I think that is a good. I love this analogy of when cars were invented, we didn't shoot all the horses.
Very true, Mel, and well said. And it's important to note as well, this is not just a problem Microsoft's trying to solve. The whole industry is trying to solve this problem at the moment. And we're actually doing a campaign with Zoom, which is coming out over the next month or so. So keep your eyes on the website, and that will really delve into agentic AI, those use cases, and what to look for in your own business as well. Should we move on to our next topic? We've got a report from IDC. It's Microsoft related again. And newsflash, everyone, Microsoft is dominating the world of UC. Who knew? Kieran, tell us about that report. What's going on there?
Yeah, thanks, David. The IDC has published its worldwide quarterly unified communications and collaboration tracker for 2024. A nice, concise title there, which reported that the UC and collaboration market ended last year in good health, with global revenues having jumped 8% year over year to $69.2 billion. Perhaps the most interesting figure, however, as you alluded to, David, was below the line, which it found that Microsoft now accounts for 45.6% of the global market, which is obviously very, very close to a full half. And this has caused quite a stir online. Dom, what are your thoughts on this report, especially that Microsoft figure? Do you concur with its findings, or are you more skeptical?
I think we can't disagree that Microsoft plays a very important role in the UC space. They have come from a pretty, well, you see where Teams has come in, voice enablement within Teams. We're at 20-something million users. No company has had that growth over the last 5 or 6 years since they launched. So have done incredibly well there. The 41%, that just seems a bit high to me. And when you look at Microsoft's revenue, the whole of the business productivity, or productivity and business processes, which includes all of the Office 365, all of the consumer stuff, all of the LinkedIn revenues, all the dynamic revenues, is 77 billion. So if we're saying that 31.5 billion of that is directly into the UC space, it'd be interesting just to see exactly what that number looks like in terms of what are we counting as that UC&C revenue. I think from my perspective, even if you look at the stats here, I mean, Microsoft over 20 million Teams phone enabled users at the moment. WebEx got 17, but another 30 million, let's say, on BroadWorks from service providers globally. RingCentral got for a few million in there. 8x8 got a few million. Reach got a few million. Zoom got a few more million. I think they're above 10 now that they're talking about. And you start adding that all together and you're getting to a number, let's say around 105, 110 million globally of UCaaS users, let's call it. If Teams has only got 20, let's say 25 million of that, that's around 25% market share. And if you take on a revenue perspective, I'd expect that to be lower just in terms of the cost that Teams costs compared to some of those other services out there. So let's not diminish Teams' position in the market, but there's a lot of other providers who are doing very well in the UC&C space. And I don't think we're counting apples and apples here. I think there's a lot of different pieces put in here. So I disagree with it slightly, but I think that the message is still pretty strong that Microsoft is doing incredibly well in that enterprise space.
I think that the numbers really don't matter that much. And I don't know why we focus on. I think Microsoft has reached what I think of as de facto standard status, right? Very much like Cisco is in networking or Dell is in crappy commodity servers or whatever. They are, by all accounts, when you talk to businesses, more often than not, you're going to hear Teams is in there as their primary UC vendor. Now, when that happens, the only way another vendor can really disrupt them is to either through innovation or through cost, right? And what worries me about this industry is that most of the vendors have chosen to do it by cost. You look at Zoom. Zoom's rolled out feature after feature, and they hold the price where it is. And if you look, Zoom has more customers than they've ever had before. They get more products they have before, but their market cap is less than it was pre-pandemic, right? Which shows that from an investor perspective, you don't really believe there's a pot at the end of the rainbow that's going to grow the company significantly. And I think the question from here is, can somebody disrupt Microsoft, using something as a differentiator before they reach not just de facto standard, but monopoly-like status, in which case which they have obviously in the Office space, right? And although they hate that M word, but when that happens, it creates a deflationary effect for everybody around them, and then allows them to continue to raise prices up, which is what they've done historically. And so I think even from a customer standpoint, protect yourself, right? Make sure you have a second vendor in there. And because you've seen it play out in the Office space and stuff, they raise prices, they nickel and dime, and you wind up paying an awful lot of money for what people think of as a free product. But I think, once a vendor reaches de facto standard, everyone knows Microsoft's one, then you can argue about who's two, but it's such a distant two that it's not really, a serious threat anymore.
Great. Should we move on to our final topic of today then? And that is Avaya. Back in the news with a positive story this time, which is great to see. Well, I hope it's positive. Their new Infinity platform. Now, of course, the Infinity platform is based on from the Edify acquisition of about a year ago or so. Now this is blending AI and orchestration together in the CX smorgasbord. Now, I know I've spoken to a lot of partners about this, and although they welcome innovation coming out of Avaya finally. There is a slightly awkward with transitioning people from the AXP platform to the new platform. They've sold the AXP dream and now they're changing it again. But hopefully this is a kind of a new frontier for Avaya. Kieran, what's your take on that?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think you covered most of the interesting aspects, especially with that transition. But I think what I'm particularly curious about is the broader hybrid strategy there. We've seen Avaya really focus in on that, similar to what Mitel are doing during their own belated transition period. And it feels like this is their big hybrid pitch. Blair, I believe you have some insights on this one.
Yeah, it's definitely all about hybrid. And, they say their vision is to deliver one common platform and code base that can be delivered in the cloud, hybrid, and on-prem. And we have to remember that when they say cloud, they're still talking private cloud. So it's not multi-tenant, it's a single tenant. So yeah, they throw around the word cloud and you have to dig in and say, is it public cloud? Is it, multi-tenant? But this, for now, at least, it's single tenant, so it's private cloud, and not the typical CCaaS or the public tenant. So hybrid is definitely a big part of this, and this they also say that this is the go forward platform. So it's it's the single platform to create customer connection is how they're framing it. And I loved last week or earlier this week. God, it's been a long week. Someone on LinkedIn about when someone posted something, they said they went from Definity to Infinity, because Definity was, their old product a long time ago, but, pointing to the fact that they've gone through so many changes and so many different products. But they did say that this, Infinity is the go forward product and AXP is going to, move into this. So the whole idea behind it was, they acquired Edify last year, and Edify was really strong in orchestration and omnichannel. But Edify didn't really have the branding and the marketing, capabilities, and it also was lacking some reporting and things. So they took the Edify orchestration and omnichannel and combined that with Avaya's reporting, dynamic routing, and hyper personalization to create these seamless experiences across every channel. And they talked a lot about breaking down silos and bringing everything together. And really, the problem they said they're trying to solve is these disconnected and fractured experiences that we all go through. So now, by offering this end-to-end orchestration and connecting all these different systems, from third parties and from Avaya and different applications, and leveraging a data lake, they can bring everything together, which everybody's talking about. It's the same vision that we've heard from everybody. But again, the idea is that it's one cloud architecture, one code base across on-prem, cloud, and hybrid. And they also said that it's not so existing Avaya customers don't have to migrate. It's basically like just a software upgrade. So it's not this big rip and replace migration. So we'll see how that goes, because companies say that, but it's got to be more than that.
Innovation without disruption, right?
Exactly. Yeah, but they did say for Aura and Elite customers, it's basically upgrading the software. They get to keep their workloads and just take the new omni-channel capabilities at their own pace. But they said several times it's an upgrade, not a migration. They didn't talk much about AI agents, but they are partnering with Cognigy, Verint, and some other companies. So they are going to have the AI capabilities, but I'm assuming most of it is going to come from partners. And again, the idea is to make this open enough so that they can integrate easily with partners. They also said it's going to be cloud neutral, so it's going to run on Google, Amazon, Microsoft. So right now I think it's only running on one, but the plan is to run on all three. And as I said, backward compatibility to work with Elite and Aura, while adding this, AI and intelligent orchestration into existing environments to connect everything together. So that's the vision, and that's what they're talking about. How they're going to do it, they laid out the architecture a little bit, but whenever I hear backward compatible, I always think, wait, it can't be as easy as that. But but basically this is going after, large enterprises. So they're sticking with that. And, as to Zeus's point, the innovation without disruption, saying organizations that want to innovate at their own pace while protecting their existing infrastructure and investments. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to the story, but it's very early days, and we'll have to see, how our partner is going to take to it, because these poor partners, they have to go through so much, going from the old stuff to AXP, and now from AXP to Infinity and beyond. So there's a lot of moving pieces.
There is, but it is a simplified story. And the first time I talked to the CEO Patrick Dennis about it, he was very critical about the company in the past, trying to be all things to all people, right? And so you threw some names in there, Aura, AXP, don't forget Oceana, all these other products they've had along the way, the snap-ins, things like that, and they've just had a mess of products. Yeah, they've had a mess of products that they delivered to a bunch of different audiences. Now it's one platform. Infinity. And so this is the go forward platform of the company. Now let's just hope they stick with it. I don't really have a problem with it being single tenant, because in the large enterprise space, if you look on the compute side, Broadcom bought VMware, they've oriented everything around Cloud Foundation, which is a big private cloud stack. Those large enterprises tend to buy a lot of private cloud. If you do want something that's multi-tenant looking, a partner can actually host it and make it and sell it that way if they want to, but that's really up to the partner. Although it isn't a true multi-tenant product, so you'd be crazy to buy it that way.
No, I don't have an issue with the single tenant and not being multi. My only thing is when you say cloud, people automatically think public cloud. So just framing it.
Yeah. And what's interesting though is the UC&C integration that we all talk about. The one segment where they haven't really been integrated is large enterprise, where the contact center organization tends to be separate from the people that run the employee workforce. So they are bringing them together, and I think with that they'll have to look for specific workflows in which that's meaningful, because once you move down market, you're the same buyer, right? And it's easy to sell data. In the large enterprises, that's a little more difficult. But I do think that they've oriented this primarily as a contact center product, I think with the understanding that UC has almost become a commodity. So it's really contact center first. If they happen to sell some UC on the back end, I think that's fine. And but I think it's just, can they stick with it, right? And this is the problem Avaya's had in the past. They had the next product, and then for whatever reason, it kind of went away in favor of the next thing. And so if Infinity indeed is their go forward product, I just want to see them, next year at this time, we talk about Infinity, 2, right? And not some other product that they acquired and brought in, and now that they have a totally different architecture. But that's been the too much change, and too many products has really been their problem. And this Patrick's trying to simplify that. So
yeah, and Zeus, I totally agree with everything you said. I love that it's one platform, and they are simplifying things, and they're making it very clear. So I think the goals and the vision and everything are great, and talking about AI orchestration, I think is really important, and the being backward compatible. I think this is all great. So the vision and everything they're talking about, it's as we said, just another change that people have to think about and deal with. But they say it's backward compatible, so hopefully, for customers, it'll be really easy. So yeah, I wish them well, and I hope this is the go forward platform for Infinity.
Yeah, and I do think it's a good enough product that if you're still an Avaya customer, you're likely to stick with it after all they've been through. The question is, can they get new customers with it, right? That I think is their bigger challenge.
Yeah, that question was asked during the briefing, and they did say that if a customer wants, especially a hybrid or an on-prem solution, they will definitely go after new customers with this. It's not their number one thing that they're going after, but there's definitely, whereas a few months ago they were saying we're just sticking with our existing base, but they did say with this product we can go after new customers.
It seems to me like they are actually finally matching up their product with their messaging. And that's been a problem for a while. They've been saying, innovation without disruption, and we want to be a place from surface level interaction to the center of customer excellence and connection. And so this is the first thing that actually looks like it can actually do that. And I think another notable thing is just their AI agnostic approach. So letting organizations use the AI tools that they want. So you have to recognize that enterprises want this like flexibility and control.
Well, especially in the large enterprise segment, Mel, right? Those companies are going to have their preferred AI partners. So.
Right. So I think the architecture of this supports that deployment across, as you discussed, major cloud providers, but then as well as on-premise environments. So it's good for like their customers who have this strict data and regulatory requirements. So I think it addresses a lot of things that, are never straightforward and never all at once migrations. So, but they're kind of enabling this additive innovation and new capabilities to position themselves better.
Just to add to this, I think speaking to a lot of their partners over the last 6 to 12 months, it gives direction. A lot of them have said, look, we just need Avaya to tell us what are they doing so we can actually tell their customers, okay, this is what it is. So from my perspective, and spoken to a number of the partners around it, that lack of feedback, that lack of, I wouldn't say direction, but that lack of, okay, what's next? What are we doing? Hopefully that clears it up. Hopefully that gives their partners the confidence to say this is the platform to move forward on, and we're comfortable with that. And yeah, if the partners are happy with it, I think the customers will be on that as well, because the customers are trusting those partners to help deliver. So from my perspective, it's a step in the right direction. It's now down to execution. And as Blair said, saying that the platform is backwards compatible is very different from actually making it and solving that. So I think it's his first step on a long road, I think. But yeah, hopefully it's in the right direction.
I think it is, but so hopefully it's a to infinity and beyond scenario. We're coming towards the end of our session. Thank you everyone for your insights. Before we go though, I'll just do a quick event update. June is a ridiculously busy month for the events. We have Infocom in early June, followed by CCW, followed by Nice Interactions on the 16th, and then Commsverse, which is a Microsoft-focused event on the 18th of June. If you see one of us or one of our community members there, go and say hi, have a chat. You're more than welcome. And for now, Dom, Mel, Blair, Zeus, and Kieran, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you at the next one.